Hello and welcome back to RWR Plays TEW 2020. This is episode 2 of our WCW series where we're playing as Eric Bischoff as if Fusion Media Ventures took over WCW in 2001 as opposed to Vince McMahon and the WWE buying the company in April of that year. And as you will have seen from the thumbnail and the title of this video, we are indeed going to be kicking off WCW with the first episode of Nitro under the new regime. You will recall that the last episode I talked about whether or not we would relaunch with the Big Bang or with an episode of Nitro before that pay-per-view. And even though I like the idea of relaunching with the Big Bang pay-per-view, I think there's a certain kind of excitement about that and possibly the best way to get the company off and running with a big kind of explosion and a big impact. I felt like it wasn't really going to work for what I wanted to do, because I just felt like if we went straight to a pay-per-view we'd have to run effectively a glorified version of Nitro, because you'd have to set up the matches on the pay-per-view or at least set up the context for those matches on the pay-per-view, and it just felt a little bit of a, as I said, a glorified version of Nitro. And I also think that in truth WCW for a lot of its history was trying to come up with a quick fix or a shotgun or hot-shotted angle to almost just sort of push the company back to its previous level of popularity in an instant, as if that was even possible. Like they did it with even as far back as like 1998 with Bill Goldberg's victory of the WCW title on Nitro. Like that was originally supposed to be a dark match, him and Hulk Hogan, for the 40,000 people who were at the Georgia Dome that night. And instead, because Eric Bischoff wanted to win a weekly battle in the ratings war that week, he decided to put it on the show and have Goldberg win the title. And that was like a hot shot angle that instead of them making millions of dollars off of because loads of people bought the pay-per-view, they instead gave it away for free just to win, as I said, that round of the weekly ratings war, which was, you know, massive kind of waste for, you know, this company that you know, could have made loads of money from it. And that wasn't the only time they did it. They did it later that year when they brought in the Ultimate Warrior. They did it in 1999 on countless occasions, you know, for example bringing in Kiss and Megadeth, and then spending loads of money on the Eric Bischoff talk show segment, and then doing the WCW $1 million giveaway. And then of course Russo's reign, which is pretty much entirely hot shot angles and trying to force eyes onto the product just by making loads and loads of noise. And they didn't take any lessons really from how WWE had recovered from the position they were in 1997. And the real lesson there was that what WWE did was just gradually and working hard improve their product bit by bit by bit, long term, and to ensure a kind of a longer term success. So I just felt like all these attempts at hot-shotting angles, at kind of making a big splash and turning the corner in a moment have meant that WCW don't have any real credibility in that regard anymore. I didn't really feel like by the time this pay-per-view came along, people would almost trust WCW to deliver something in that vein. So what I thought is, instead, let's do it the opposite way. Let's have a low-key start. Let's just have WCW Monday Nitro air for 1 week and then do the pay-per-view. That allows us to build up some of the matches, announce loads of stuff ahead of time, and start to get people anticipating the show, but also kind of speaks to that. What we're going to do is we're going to get our heads down, work hard, just improve the product overall, improve the stories, improve the characters, get a better roster, and then gradually, you know, win back viewers through consistent quality as opposed to just big, grand gestures that didn't really go anywhere. So that's kind of the reason I made that decision to go in that direction. Now, I've got a little bit of a confession to make, because I also did play ahead a little bit. So I did a test run of this, and I found a number of issues that really became a big deal for the company. So I'm going to show you a few bits and pieces, and the main one is around this thing, the backstage kind of influence and the backstage atmosphere. You see there we've got a number of people who are kind of negative influences backstage, and that's actually a lower number than it was when I first started the game. There was actually quite a few of them, and what I've decided to do, because when I played ahead in the game, actually the backstage atmosphere became such a problem for me, it became such an issue, that I had to kind of clear out anybody who was a negative influence, who wasn't going to be a major part of the product going forward. And so I've already released a number of individuals as part of the game. Like I have taken out Big Vito, I've released Cash, I've released Disco Inferno, Gene Okerlund, Johnny Ace, Kiwi, Sid Vicious, all guys that were actually negative influences. I've also added some bits and pieces to the backstage rules. I've organised a chiropractor, transport organised, catering's provided, a masseuse's provided, various other things, and that's meant that the backstage rules are now having a positive effect on morale, and the backstage rating's up to 54%, which previously it was only 33%, and then it just absolutely went way down after that. And I've got plans to release one or two additional people on that kind of list of notable personalities who are bad influence, because they too are contributing to what is effectively a really difficult game atmosphere to work with, because once the morale goes, it really goes. I've also, you'll see here, I'm looking at the drug testing. I've chosen to remove the drug testing because that was another problem that I was facing as part of this game when I played ahead. Like, loads of people were being found to be taking drugs, then I'd have to discipline them, and when I disciplined them, that then reduced their morale even further. So we're just in a spiral of problems. So for the moment, that's perhaps a bit controversial, but I'm getting rid of the drug testing so that I don't have to deal with those disciplinary issues, and therefore I don't add to our potential problems with the backstage rating. And maybe we'll bring that back. We'll bring drug testing back once things settle down and become a little bit easier to manage in terms of the backstage morale, because that, as I said, that became a major problem for me on the game, because we've just got so many personalities who are negative. In addition to those things, I've also changed a few things here. So for example, Dusty Rhodes, he had a number of different roles. I've limited him just to being a road agent now so that he actually does that job. And then Jimmy Hart, I've removed his road agent responsibilities because I found that just he was not very good at it. So that's a few sort of changes I made that I learnt were a problem when I first started playing the game, and I've just changed them in the course of the game now. And so that's just another example of where playing ahead a little bit has allowed me to kind of understand and change things for the better going into the proper playthrough that I'm going to be doing at this point. Okay, so I think it's time then. Let's go to our first episode of Nitro under the new regime. Okay, so we start with a dark match here then. It's Alex Wright and Norman Smiley versus James Storm and Chris Harris. Segment rating of 41. You can see there Norman Smiley and Alex Wright pretty decent in terms of their ratings. Not so great for Chris Harris and James Storm, but that's fine. They're still young, still green. That will take some time. One of the reason I did this match, I mean, other than the fact that I'm going to do dark matches in general, was that I wanted to see if Alex Wright and Norman Smiley could work together as a tag team, because I don't really have anything else for them to do. And according to this, they have excellent chemistry teaming together, so that's a real help. Alex Wright and Norman Smiley then can become a regular tag team going forward, and that will certainly help me out in the long run. Looking for a tag team name for them. I'm going to make them less about the dancey dance moves that they tend to both do, and more both serious wrestlers. So maybe anybody got any idea for what I could call them, let me know in the comments. That would be cool. Segment rating 41 though. Norman Smiley and Alex Wright, both good ratings. Happy with that. Good chemistry. Off to the next segment. We've got Mike Sanders versus Lash LaRue. Mike Sanders defeats Lash LaRue in 720 by pinfall. Segment rating of 30. Mike Sanders and Lash LaRue both did pretty well, although they don't click particularly in terms of their chemistry. The crowd for this, 1,362 people in the Bakersfield Dome. Not a great start in terms of our attendance. And we go into WC Nitro itself. Eric Bischoff welcomes the fans back to WCW Nitro, and he's got a number of things to say. First of all, he talks about how Booker T is currently the world and the US title holder, and the WCW Championship Committee have decided that he will not be able to represent WCW or either belt well if he's holding them both, so they have stripped him of the US title, and a tournament will begin tonight. The first round matches taking place to crown a new US champion. The semi-finals will take place at the Big Bang, and the final will be on Monday Nitro next week. He also talks about the fact that any previous stipulations that meant that certain wrestlers were banished from WCW or banned from WCW will be lifted, so anybody could return at the Big Bang. And he also announces that the main event of the Big Bang will see WCW World Champion Booker T defending against the man who defeated Ric Flair on the last episode of Monday Nitro on TNT, that being Sting. So it will be Booker T versus Sting for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship at the Big Bang. So he's then interrupted by Scott Steiner and Rick Steiner. And Scott Steiner in particular is angry about the announcement that has just been made by Eric Bischoff that Booker T will defend the WCW title against Sting at the Big Bang. Scott Steiner says that he should get the title shot at the Big Bang. He says that he was the man who was the holder of the WCW title until Booker T cheated his way to a victory over him on the final Nitro on TNT. And he says that he wants his automatic rematch as a former champion. He's owed that by everybody involved. Eric Bischoff, however, informs him that that's not how WCW are going to do things going forward. The WCW Championship Committee have determined that there will no longer be an automatic right to a former champion to get a rematch for a belt. They'll have to earn a title match just like everybody else. So this is a really good segment. Everybody came across well. Eric Bischoff, Scott Steiner worked well, had the freedom to improvise and used it to their advantage. A segment rating of 68. We've got Nitro off to a really good start here with this segment between Eric Bischoff, Scott Steiner and Rick Steiner. And we're not done yet. And that's because out comes Ric Flair, as well as the rest of the Magnificent Seven, Road Warrior Animal, Jeff Jarrett, Buff Bagwell and Lex Luger with him. And Ric Flair is angry. He says to Eric Bischoff that he has just come from the back where he's been finalising for the last few hours a major contract for Scott Steiner to face Booker T in the main event of the Big Bang for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. And he says to Eric Bischoff that the last he understood, he was still in charge of WCW and that Scott Steiner should be given, therefore, a rematch against Booker T. Eric Bischoff, however, informs Ric Flair that with the new change in management, he has been relieved of all of his duties as the CEO, and now he, Eric Bischoff, is the CEO. Ric Flair has no further jurisdiction as a controlling force in WCW. Ric Flair is apoplectic at this announcement and says that Eric Bischoff, as well as WCW and everybody else involved in this conspiracy, will pay for their treachery. Another good segment, this one, 62. Good performance from Eric Bischoff. Not so good from Ric Flair. A bit of a shame there, but ultimately all this opening segment's been pretty good. I didn't really want to start with a massive talking segment because I think it was a bit cliched, especially back in like the 2000s and 90s. But I just felt like we needed some exposition at the beginning of this show to get WCW kicked off and to introduce some of the concepts we were bringing in particular to set up the 8-person US title tournament that was going to be the focus of this first episode of Nitro. So all of that was pretty important to the overall show, and so I just felt like I needed it. Hopefully I won't be doing that too often going forward because I think it's a bit of a cliche, and I think we need to try and present WCW as somewhat of an alternative, at least, to the WWE and what they were doing at the time. So on to our first match, and it is for the US title tournament. It's one of the first round matches. Mike Awesome defeats Dustin Rhodes in 10 minutes 27 by pinfall. This one's got a segment rating of 44, which isn't great, but not too bad. I think that's largely down to, by the looks of it, poor announcing, really, because Mike Tenay and Stevie Ray really clash on commentary. So that's a big, major problem that we've got in terms of their ability to work together, and another reason why we have to fix it. Both performed pretty well, but this overall segment just suffered because of the poor announcing. Then a backstage interview where Tony Schiavone catches up with Chavo Guerrero Jr. Tony Schiavone introduces the concept that Chavo Guerrero Jr. is going to be challenging Shane Helms at the Big Bang for the Cruiserweight title, and Chavo Guerrero Jr. says that he's a sure thing at the Big Bang to win the Cruiserweight title from Helms. This only got a rating of 34. Tony Schiavone worked quite well, and Chavo Guerrero was struggling during the segment. And this is just obviously Tony Schiavone is going to be our new interview guy, because I think that he's obviously pretty good at it, as you can see there, and also we needed something for him to do, and I felt like we didn't have someone who was good in this position. Moving on to the next match, it's Kanyon versus Ernest Miller. See, Kanyon defeated Ernest Miller in 6:57 by pinfall. Segment rating of 52. Kanyon was a pretty good performer here. Ernest Miller not so great. The only reason I put this match on really was because there was an ongoing storyline between Kanyon and Ernest Miller, and I thought, I don't really want to take it forward, but I also don't want people to be let down. So here's the conclusion to that story. Kanyon defeats Ernest Miller. I don't know if I'll use Ernest Miller much going forward, but certainly we needed to just finish off this story for anyone who was interested in it in the previous WCW. As you can see here, Kanyon pretty good, Ernest Miller not so great. Next up, Jeff Jarrett versus Conan, another match in the US title tournament. Jeff Jarrett wins in 8:02 by pinfall by using underhanded tactics. The Jeff Jarrett and Mike Awesome are the two men through in the tournament so far, but they're not facing each other in the semi-final. Their opponents are still to be determined. The segment rating here, 56. That's not too bad, and both of them actually were better in terms of their performance, and I get the impression everybody's been dragged down by that kind of commentary. Next up then, Shane Douglas comes out in front of the crowd and he talks about how he is flabbergasted at being left out of the United States title tournament. He can't believe he's not been given the opportunity to win the US title, but rather than whine about it, rather than complain about it, he's out here to be proactive and show everybody that this new beginning for WCW is also the new beginning for Shane Douglas, the franchise of WCW, and he's going to prove that he's the franchise of WCW because he listened to what Eric Bischoff said earlier on in the show about all the previous match stipulations being scrubbed, meaning that certain people could return to WCW, and amongst those people, one of the people that could return is Bill Goldberg, and Douglas says that he's calling Goldberg out. He says that he's challenging Bill Goldberg to turn up on Sunday at the Big Bang and face him like a man in a match one-on-one, so that Shane Douglas can prove that he is, going forward, the absolute franchise of WCW. So this is just a bit of a thing to get Shane Douglas out in front of the crowd, and you can see it's a good segment rating of 71. Shane Douglas really, really good. Although it says he performed poorly, it's still a good segment rating, which shows maybe that's because Goldberg is mentioned, and Goldberg's obviously a big star, but that's a really positive thing. Next up, we have a 4-way tag team match for a shot at the Cruiserweight Tag Team titles at the Big Bang. And in this match, Elix Skipper and Kid Romeo defeated 3-Count Air Raid and the Yun Dragons when Elix Skipper pinned Yang. So they will go on to face Rey Mysterio Jr. and Billy Kidman at the Big Bang. You can see here the rating for the segment is 44. Shannon Moore, pretty good performance. Kaz Hayashi also very good. Not so great from everybody else. And indeed, the winners themselves were amongst the poorest performers in the match. But anyway, they go on to the pay-per-view to face Rey Mysterio and Billy Kidman. And some work to do with these Cruiserweight tag teams, certainly. Next up, backstage, Tony Schiavone interviews Diamond Dallas Page, and Dallas Page effectively just hypes up his main event match with Rick Steiner later tonight. Their match will be one of the US title tournament first round matches, DDP versus Rick Steiner, and this is just DDP doing his best to hype that up. The segment rating only 57, not especially great, but this was just there really to fill time more than anything else, if I'm perfectly honest with you. Then we've got Lance Storm versus Hugh Morris. So this is another match in the US title tournament, and Lance Storm wins in 10:36 by submission, and that means that Lance Storm will face his Team Canada teammate Mike Awesome at the Big Bang in the first semi-final of the two US title tournament matches. So Lance Storm going through. I said Lance Storm and Mike Awesome are going to be quite important to the future of the company going forward when I did my introductory episode, and they will be facing each other, heel versus heel, at the pay-per-view. Segment rating is 54, which is not bad at all. Lance Storm, a really good performance. Hugh Morris, not so good, but still pretty decent. Then we move on to a little segment backstage where Lex Luger and Buff Bagwell are cut a promo on Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo, and it's revealed during this promo that Totally Buff, Luger and Bagwell will be facing Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo for O'Haire and Palumbo's WCW Tag Team titles at the Big Bang. You can see here Lex Luger improvised well throughout the segment, and the segment rating was a 58, which is not bad at all. So they're just hyping up that match coming at the Big Bang on the Sunday. And then we get the main event of the show. Diamond Dallas Page defeats Rick Steiner in 17:20 by pinfall to advance to the semi-finals of the US title tournament, and he will face Jeff Jarrett at the Big Bang. Not amazing match, only 59 rated, though Diamond Dallas Page had a 70 and Rick Steiner a 62. So I think, again, that commentary, the color commentator position Stevie Ray, and in particular the lack of chemistry between Mike Tenay and Stevie Ray has really affected pretty much everything on the show. And to end the show, we have a dueling promo between Sting and Booker T, where both of them talk about why winning at the Big Bang means so much to them. First of all, Booker T talks about how he has done his best to represent WCW as its world champion. He's always wanted to be world champion, and he's done it on a number of occasions now, but he still feels like he hasn't been given the chance to really prove to everybody that he's on that top level. And this is his big chance now, taking on someone the stature of Sting, and he intends fully to become the WCW champion that he always believed he could be. Sting, in the meantime, talks about how there's nothing more important to him than WCW, and at the top of WCW is that World Heavyweight Championship, the biggest prize in the game. And he says that he's got a lot of professional respect for Booker T, but when they get to Sunday in that world title match, that respect will go out of the window, because Sting is all about winning the World Championship at the Big Bang. So a pretty good segment here, in fact a very good segment, 86 rated. Again, poor commentary, so it might have even been better with better commentary. Sting clearly enjoyed having the freedom to go off script and performed well. And this is just hyping that main event for the world title between Sting and Booker T. Give it some gravitas, give these two people, really make a sports feel for our main event at the Big Bang, which is about two guys who are desperate to win the world championship match. And Booker T desperate to hold on to his belt, Sting desperate to get the championship, which he considers the biggest prize in the game. And so that is the full show. Got here, show increased our popularity in 11 regions, really good, an overall rating of 66. Really okay main event between DDP and Rick Steiner. Sting and Booker T's segment though was excellent and really probably beefed up that overall rating. And that's everything. So yeah, that's the first Nitro in the books, and we've 6 days away from the Big Bang. I think that everything's now set in place. We'll go through the card as it has been set in just a second. Relatively happy with that. A little bit of a low-key episode in general. Nothing major taking place, but just a way to set up what the Big Bang will be and what we're gonna put on that show, because I just felt like that was a better way of doing it than just going straight into a pay-per-view and then introducing the context and going through all of those angles that we needed to go through to give the exposition, but doing it on a pay-per-view would have felt wrong. So just gonna quickly show the pre-booking we've got in place for the Big Bang ring. So Booker T and Sting for the WCW title. We've got the 2 US title tournament semi-final matches, DDP and Jeff Jarrett, Mike Awesome and Lance Storm. Kidman and Rey Mysterio Jr. versus Elix Skipper and Kid Romeo for the Cruiserweight Tag Team Championships. We've got the Heavyweight Tag Team Championship, Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo defending against Totally Buff. Shane Helms against Chavo Guerrero Jr. for the Cruiserweight title. And of course, will Goldberg show up? Shane Douglas has put his open challenge out he's put his challenge out to Goldberg to show up at the Big Bang and face him in a match at that show. So that's everything that's set for the card. Hopefully we'll also have been successful in some of our negotiations to bring in some new talent for that show too. So even though it wasn't the sort of official launch show of WCW, the Big Bang should contain plenty to whet people's appetite for what's coming in the future of WCW. We've got hopefully going to have some people turning up on the show, a couple of surprises, and a pretty decent card in general, I think, as we look to move forward with the new era of WCW. So that's everything I wanted to go through today. That's the end of this episode. I don't know when the next episode will be up, but hopefully it won't be up too long, maybe a couple of days, maybe 3-4 days. If you've enjoyed the episode, please give us a like and of course subscribe to carry on following the series beyond this point. And thank you for watching.